From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, Happy New Year. SportsLine on News Channel 5 Plus. Steve Lehman here with you. Travis Haney, our guest tonight from 24/7 Sports, and we're going to go through a bunch of topics. It's been a little while since we've had a show, so we're going to hit on the end of the Titans season. We're going to hit on a big return tonight for Shea Weber, the longtime captain of the Predators, back in Smashville. Of course, the college football bowl season and playoff as well. That's where Travis has tons of expertise. So we'll get right to it. Travis, great to see you, buddy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and all the viewers out there in the 615.
Let me ask you about your New Year's plans, because I'll get to how unexciting my New Year's Eve was. Besides the dud of a playoff, what did you end up doing New Year's Eve? Because you were in Atlanta for one game.
I covered the Peach Bowl, so I had plenty of New Year's plans during the afternoon. And the evening, I thought I was going to be hurrying to watch the Fiesta Bowl. And by the time that I got to it at halftime, it was really just trying to figure out if Ohio State could make it a game, and it never happened.
How soon did you have your game story or whatever you were working on done after that one?
Well, Alabama cooperated a little bit as far as that went, because it's not as if I had to wait until the final minutes to get started on Alabama playing for what would be its 5th national championship in 8 seasons, Steve. I mean, it's an incredible run that Nick Saban and that staff have been on, but not without some adventure this week leading into the game against Clemson.
No, we'll certainly get to that coming up. I also would be remiss. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
I'm going to throw that out there to you and Brooke.
She'll appreciate that.
Absolutely. I will tell you from my New Year's Eve perspective, your night sounds much more interesting than mine. I was home in sweatpants on the couch hoping for a really good game in that second one, and we did not get it. So I was pretty much asleep by the time we hit New Year's. As for the actual games itself, I think a lot of people, especially in this part of the country, thought Alabama was going to take care of Washington. They've just been so good all year. It was hard to sort of piece together how Washington made that game really competitive. But I think most people expected the Fiesta Bowl game to be a really good game. So what happened?
I don't know. I'm like you. I think we spent a month probably figuring out how Washington could hang around in the game, and it did score first, and it did kind of have its moments here and there. The game really wasn't put away until early in the fourth quarter when Bo Scarborough takes a pretty normal-looking play and turns it into a 68-yard touchdown. But the other game, it felt like a coin flip. Ohio State was a narrow favorite. You thought maybe Clemson has an edge in certain areas, but I had kind of talked myself into thinking Ohio State may be the better team in that game because of its secondary and how many picks Deshaun Watson had thrown for Clemson.
And they got a couple of them. They just couldn't make it count.
Well, and the Clemson defense wound up being the story, and I don't think that's something that we saw coming. We were watching some of the clips from the Alabama defense. Now, that we expected. We thought Jake Browning was going to have a very difficult game against, especially that Alabama front seven. And Jonathan Allen, first time seeing him in person, as advertised. I mean, he affects and impacts every play, it seems like, for that Alabama defense. But the Clemson defensive line, I think that's an interesting storyline to watch going into that game this week, just how they really neutralized Ohio State. You don't see that very often at all. You don't see it ever. That Urban Meyer team just beaten, out-coached, out-manned, really, for 4 quarters.
The thing that really got me about the Fiesta Bowl is when Ohio State got the interception on the first possession of the game, and they've got it down there at the 30-yard line or whatever it was. I started to think, okay, this is their recipe.
Right.
And then they immediately go 3 and out and miss the field goal. And I thought, oh boy, this could be a long night for the Ohio State offense if they can't move the ball in that situation.
Well, I think they had 20 rushing yards at the half with Mike Weber, and you'd expect J.T. Barrett to be a factor in that as well. And again, it really goes back to the job that Brent Venables did, the defensive coordinator for Clemson. He won the Broyles Award this year for the top assistant coach in college football, and you understand why. I mean, he was a finalist last year because of how many players they replaced on that team that went to the championship game. They lost a whole bunch more on defense coming into this season, and yet you'd never know it. I mean, they have recruited extremely well. That's a huge part of it. But what Venables has done to plug in those guys and get them ready to play, that is as big of a win as I can remember. That wasn't expected. And we've seen Alabama do it. We've seen Ohio State at times do it. Even a couple of years ago, the Ohio State win against Alabama, that didn't feel that shocking. What Clemson did Saturday night, that was shocking to me.
Does Brent Venables want to be a head coach? Because the job he's done at Clemson has been remarkable. And he took an Oklahoma defense. I know the offense was really good, but took an Oklahoma defense to a national championship game before. He's got the resume of a guy who should get a job if he wants it.
You know, it's funny you asked me that because I got a text sometime during the second half of the Clemson game asking exactly why. And it was a coach wanting to know why Venables hadn't taken a job yet. It's simple math at this point, Steve, because Venables is probably going to get another raise, and that raise is going to take him close to $2 million a year for an assistant coach. And
nice work if you can get it.
If you like where you live, you like who you're working for, you're obviously playing and coaching at a high level, you would almost have to take a pay cut for one of those group of 5 jobs or even some power 5 jobs if you wanted to be a head coach. I think he does have that desire, but we've seen it with Kirby Smart. He waited for his alma mater. Brent Venables went to Kansas State. I mean, maybe that's an opportunity for him down the road, but he certainly has put himself in a position to be patient.
Speaking of assistant coaches, Lane Kiffin. He obviously was there in some part of himself on Saturday for the Peach Bowl. But clearly Nick Saban didn't think he was getting the job done. Can you think of any situation before in sports, not just college football, where a coach would make this type of a move? If you haven't heard, Lane Kiffin is out for the national championship game. Consultant Steve Sarkisian is in to call plays. To make that kind of a move before a championship game, it's unprecedented.
It is. I'm not completely thrown by this because I had been told in the weeks leading up to the Peach Bowl, the semifinal game, that Lane Kiffin may be on the way out at that point. So I think it was surprising to some that he coached the game on Saturday, and the reason being just kind of this accumulation frustration with Nick Saban, and is his eye really on the ball? And I think that was the question entering this week. I had a couple of people text me yesterday afternoon and say maybe he wasn't focused on Sunday when they got back to Alabama. They started dissecting Clemson tape and talking about a game plan, and there just something wasn't right in that moment, that he just didn't seem to be totally into it. And at that point, if you're not totally into it, and that's obvious to the players and the other assistant coaches in the room, it's Alabama. They've won national championships, but you're still playing for a national title. I mean, that is
right.
It was going to be, I think, a bigger detriment not to do it. But to your point, this is extremely new, and at some point we shift the focus to Steve Sarkisian, a guy who had a very rocky ending to his tenure at USC. He was kind of thrown a life preserver in the middle of this season to come on board as an analyst for Alabama, Nick Saban.
This isn't exactly bringing in Bill Walsh. You're talking about a guy who got fired from his job for alcohol abuse a year ago, has been out of football.
It's an incredible story.
He's certainly capable, but he hasn't done this for a year. He hasn't called plays for longer than that, and now you're going to put him in the biggest game of the season.
The argument you'll have on the other side is Lane Kiffin's game plan Saturday, it didn't look all that great. I don't know if we've talked about this, but I've talked about it with several other people who it didn't seem like he had as much of a plan for that game as they might have liked. And they wanted to rely on the freshman quarterback Hurts to throw more than you probably expected going into that game. And even after they had established Bo Scarborough was going to be the star and essentially save Alabama's offense for the night, they ran play action. They tried to lean on the quarterback, and it kept Washington in the game. And I think that played a part as well. Maybe all of that discussion, all that buzz in the last couple of weeks about whether Kiffin would be able to be the Florida Atlantic coach and start to put things in order there. We read an SI story last week that he was down there house hunting around Christmas time. I mean, it is hard to juggle the two. And if it was obvious to everyone in the room, that he wasn't handling it well, then this is probably something that needed to happen.
Here's my big picture Kiffin question, though, because he's not the first Alabama coordinator to be in this situation. We saw Kirby Smart do it. We've seen Nussmeier do it, and guys
Tom
like
Herman
that
did it
before.
at Ohio
Tom
State.
Herman did it at Ohio State to very good success, by the way. So how big of a flag? I realize it's Florida Atlantic, and they're probably just thrilled to have a guy like Lane Kiffin be their coach, but how big of a red flag should this be on top of everything else to the college football community about Lane Kiffin, that he's seemingly not capable to do what other people did before and balance two jobs?
It's not great. I think if I'm defending Lane on some level, I would say doing it for Nick Saban may be harder than doing it for another coach.
But other people did it.
But that's reaching. I mean, it's hard to come up with a real ironclad defense. I'll say this, if it were happening at Florida, if Lane Kiffin were taking over at Florida, I think this would be a huge issue. But at Florida Atlantic, I kind of think they know what they've signed up for. And for better or for worse, that's what they've got.
Let's sneak in a phone call here. Let's go to Dwayne. Dwayne, good evening. You're here on SportsLine.
Hello, this is Dwayne.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, buddy, I got a Titans question for you.
Fire away.
Can I ask a Titans question?
Yeah, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Well, I'm normally outside scalping tickets of the south end there. I live across Shelby Park Bridge there. But when I do get over there in the game, I get so pumped up. I'm just proud to be a Tennessean.
Nice. You got anything else there, Dwayne?
Yeah, I had a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think the offseason's going to bring as far as going in, being complete losers? And how are we going to rebound from the worst season I can remember?
Oh, I don't even know where that went all of a sudden there. Worst season that we can remember. That certainly wasn't this season for the Titans. They are a
Did
team.
you say he was a Browns fan?
Yeah. Maybe. Here's the deal with the Titans. This was a season, and we're going to get into more of this coming up probably right after our first break here, but 9-7 was a very weird feeling yesterday in that
No doubt.
building, because this is a team that had won 5 games in 2 years. So 9 wins is huge progress, but at the same time, 9 wins didn't get them into the playoffs, and they felt like they were a team that should have been in the playoffs, and instead yesterday they were packing up to go home.
We sat in these very seats a few months ago and thought 5-6 wins would be a successful season for the Tennessee Titans. And yet we're here, and you can make a pretty strong case that 9 wins, it was a disappointing season for the Tennessee Titans. And it's certainly a huge mark of progress that we're saying that. And this is literally a winning football team in 2016. But yeah, you just go, it's win by win and loss by loss. You got the big wins countered with the huge losses, and the huge losses are what kept you out.
It's incredible how the expectations changed and the feeling changed even throughout the course of the season. We got to take a break, but when we come back here on SportsLine, I'm going to lay out why the Titans missed a huge chance. It's progress moving forward, but a huge opportunity was lost. Stay tuned. More SportsLine on the way here on News Channel 5+.